Thanks, James, and welcome everybody. I'm very pleased to be here today. But first of all, I'd like to take this moment to acknowledge the traditional owners and lands that I'm on today. I'm actually in Western Australia. I've escaped Victoria for the time being, and my family's been sort of split in half through COVID, which has been quite challenging. And we've all united together with my children and myself, my wife, for the new year. So I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that I'm on. The Whadjuk Noongar people, acknowledge and pay respect to the elders past, present, and emerging. And in addition, I'd like to also acknowledge all the lands that you guys are on today, and pay respects to all of the other Indigenous brothers and sisters here today. Really proud to be here today. It's something that I think it's been in the works for a long time. But one thing with Indigenous business has been a massive focus on procurement targets with government and corporates to try and meet their 1% procurement targets, or 1 to 3% procurement targets. And I think the industry has been left behind. Probably has more of that retail, that the consumer type business. And in Australia, I think we've got some really cool businesses that have done really well, especially through COVID. Been very inventive and innovative in the way that they've generated revenue over this time. And now it's about what, Australia is only one part of the world, is how do we get Indigenous products and Indigenous knowledge out to the rest of the world to educate people, but the opportunity to share some of the learnings and some of our traditional ways across the world. And, the Australian economy is quite small compared to some of the rest around the world. And, the UK one in particular, there's a trade agreement being negotiated right now with $190 billion. Now, imagine if we, as Indigenous businesses, could secure 1% of that. That's where it's going to be life-changing for people. So we need to start thinking differently. And RMIT and the state government have put together this program in co-design with a working group, which is made up of 2 Kinaway people as well, myself and Sean Andrews, who's a member of Kinaway and a board member. And we've been involved in helping co-design this program that will make it culturally appropriate, but also identify the needs of our businesses and actually how we get them to go overseas to an export market. So RMIT put together, I guess it's an accelerator program, which we'll work with pretty closely to get businesses ready for that international market. It's going to be a few steps through the process, but there'll be an expression of interest coming out very soon for businesses that are interested in being involved. And look, we've got some really cool guests. They've got a lot of experience in this field. And if you've got any questions, please ask them as you go through, because there's no such thing as a silly question. It's how to get it to exporting is quite complicated, and you don't know what you don't know. And I've got a few businesses I've been dealing with at Kinaway at the moment that want to export, but just don't know how to go about it. What is an export? Well, an export can be anything. If you've got a website, technically you can be an export if you get customers from overseas. But when you start looking at those bigger, larger scales, there's a lot of support mechanisms out there that we just don't have access to or visibility to. So the idea of this program is to ascertain what the opportunities are, how to get your business ready for it, and facilitate that for the future. So instead of listening to me, it's probably time we bring in some of our guests. We've got some really cool guest speakers here today. We've got Bevan Mailman, Kinaway member and Managing Director of Jeremiah Legal. He'll be joining us. I can't quite see these screens, guys. Can we get that to full screen? Sorry. Okay, we've got Leslie Delaforce, is founder and managing director of DreamSpark. And then we've also got Margaret Ledwith from the Innovation and Talent from RMIT Activator. And we're also joined by Pia Herbert from the Aboriginal Economic Development Unit at DJPR. So if we could bring the guys in, that'll be great. Okay, still me. We could bring the guests in, guys. Okay, we're just going to wait on. I was having some technical issues in the background, but that's okay. I can go through some of the detail until those guys come through. So, look, it's going to be done in 3 stages. The trade route program journey. So the first stage was the co-design, which we've been heavily involved in for the last sort of 8 weeks. and then it will go to the enable, and then to the activate path, which is obviously getting it happening. The program generally run between 6 and 9 months, but it's going to be fairly structured, involving workshops, in person and also online. But I see I've got all my guests here now, so we might open it up, and I might just welcome Margaret initially as the lead for RMIT in this program. Welcome, Margaret.
Thanks, Scott. It's really great to be here. Very excited about the program and the collaboration, and looking forward to this morning's discussion and actually learning a bit more about businesses and what they really want and hope for. So thank you for including.
That's okay. Just a question for Bevan. Bevan, you've got a few businesses and you've been in business for a while, and you're a very talented man. I guess a question that a lot of people ask, and I know you're involved in another project as well, looking at exports. What are some of the opportunities and challenges, when growing an Indigenous business internationally?
Well, I think for me, thank you, Scott. I should acknowledge traditional owners, elders past and present as well. Really want to thank you for the opportunity to speak RMIT as well in Kinaway. I guess the opportunity, like 5 years ago, we found ourselves we found an IPP before us. This wonderful opportunity to joint venture and share culture and understanding to non-Indigenous businesses and grow business together. We find ourselves now with the UK FTA and looking to include in that agreement Indigenous content. We now find ourselves with the wonderful opportunity to take what we have and what we've grown locally to the international market, not least traditional knowledges that have been born over thousands of years from land, in particular in relation to using Indigenous botanicals and medicines. So I see for us a wonderful opportunity to not only embrace those companies that we've been able to establish through joint venture partners, but also to take embrace our culture and tradition over thousands of years and bring forward those medicines, those understandings to the rest of the world and market that to the likes of UK and other jurisdictions as well.
Yeah, thanks, Bevan. Now, Les, Managing Director of DreamSpark, and obviously had a fair bit of experience in establishing businesses and been through the struggles of starting up a business. What's your view on the challenges for Indigenous business to go overseas?
Cheers, thanks, Scott, and thanks for the opportunity to Kinaway and also RMIT. I too like to pay my respects to elders past and present. I'm also here in Perth in WA, along with Scott actually. So stand on Wajak Noongar land and Noongar Nation. So I'd like to pay my respects to the elders past and present and emerging leaders here in Noongar Budja and lands across the country. For me, I think what was really quite interesting is the impact that COVID-19, that pandemic, has posed significant and unique challenges for Indigenous business. And we know that, with all things being equal, that Indigenous people will bear the disproportionate brunt of these challenges. And so we're seeing, I think, a rapidly growing ecosystem in three key areas of SMEs, larger Indigenous businesses with joint ventures, and also early stage startups using tech or using innovation as a mechanism to grow and scale. I think that's a really interesting point in time where a lot of us are a consumer of products and services and technology. We need to shift to becoming a creator, particularly with the next mob when 60% of us are under 26. I'm certainly not under 26, but there's that collective focus on shifting just in this Australian domestic market to an international market. So when we've got technology that's helping to scale and speed that up, it's a really interesting time when we're combining the world's oldest culture combined with the world's newest technology. So I think that opportunity is there, and particularly Indigenous business activity within Australia continues to grow at that rapid rate. And many of those Indigenous businesses have huge export potential. But just like Bevan was saying, it's identifying where those opportunities may be. And there are consistently growing opportunities to enter the global supply chain, exploring those larger international joint ventures potentially, and also to crack open new markets.
Yeah, thanks, Liz. Probably takes me to our next question to Pia from Department of Jobs, Precincts and Regions in the Economic Development Unit. Obviously, government's funded this, so you're the money lady. You're providing all the money for this for us, which is, thank you very much. But yeah, that's right. And look, what's the government's feelings behind it, and why have they seen this as an opportunity for Indigenous businesses, and why now?
Well, I think picking up on some of what Les said about, the time is right, I think, and it's been interesting so, obviously the government sees this as the right time, the right sort of moment for our businesses to be supporting this kind of initiative. And just picking up on what Les was saying around, it's interesting looking at what's come out of, the Covid-19 pandemic and the support that that the government has provided to businesses broadly, and to some extent Aboriginal businesses specifically, particularly through the First Peoples Business Support Fund, has provided not just necessary support, but I think for a lot of businesses a real opportunity to look at how they might do things differently, how they might be able to pivot to online delivery. And as you were saying, Scott, if you've got a website, you can export. There's been an opportunity here to develop some capacity and capability that you might not otherwise have even thought about, but in the situation you've had to. So I think that has really positioned businesses even more strongly to take full advantage of a program like this.
Mm. And Margaret, I think it's a good time to have a bit of a chat to you. Obviously, you're leading this, and I guess I'd like to understand your experiences in the export market, and how you think those experiences you've had in the past, and what those opportunities might look like for Indigenous businesses from here, and what RMIT's, what's their why? Why does RMIT want to do this right now?
Thank you. Lots of questions, so I'll try to answer them succinctly. Look, in terms of export experience, it's a very personal thing for me as an Irish person. We were brought up on a country with a very small population, very limited economic outcomes for us, at least back in the 80s. So export has been part of our psyche, and I have to say I always start there with the mindset. So I think that's really, really important. And how do we build the mindset of our businesses, our Indigenous businesses, large and small, to seek out and find their place on a global stage? And I think that's a really important element of the program. And when it came across my desk, and there have been many people before me who also helped shape it, and our steering committee here today continue to do so. But the first question I asked is, what does growth mean for an Indigenous business? And how do we look at growth and exporting through the context of impact and taking Indigenous business and knowledge, to Bevan's point, to the world? I think also to Les's point, this concept of how do we blend culture and technology? How do we preserve the old and honour it and not throw it out with the new? And these are constant struggles that, from a business perspective, this kind of balance between our current business and our future business, between the old and the new, between innovation and efficiency. These are things that we're really good at. And at Activator as well. And we work a lot with organizations to help them do that. And I think that's, from a programmatic point of view, why we have that first piece where we build that common ground, we build that common understanding, we build those frameworks and language that allow us to think differently, as Pia said, about business, what it might be and where it could go. For RMIT, at this point in time, RMIT is a part of its mission, part of its purpose, part of its why is reconciliation. Another part of its why is to bring knowledge, education, connections to to life through industry, through business. Its origins are in helping the average guy in the street, to have what he needs or she needs to have to create a better world for themselves, to work, to learn, to make an impact. And so absolutely, this is a cornerstone program for the university in its reconciliation journey and in its approach to making an impact, not only in Melbourne, but equally across the globe. And of course, when it comes to export, as a university, it's uniquely positioned with campuses in Vietnam, in Spain, to leverage all of those connections and help bring Indigenous business and knowledge and impact to the world.
Yeah, thanks, Margaret. I think that's a really good point, that as a mob, what we probably need to embrace a little bit more is learning from people that have those experiences already, and it doesn't have to be our own mob. It's about how we work together, and that's true reconciliation, is when we work together. And that's why Kinaway is so proud to be able to align with organisations that have similar values like RMIT, that we can go, okay, this is going to be the betterment for our mob. No other reason, but the betterment for our mob. And if we can learn those capabilities from them, then we can pass that over to our members. So this is a great opportunity. It probably brings me to you, Les. Obviously, being a West Australian man, what sort of attracted to you to be involved in this program that's aimed at Victorian businesses?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Scott. And I guess been born in New South Wales, Kempsey, New South Wales, and coming across over here 12 years ago, we're certainly very envious of what's happening in Victoria. And I think you've got some really key support in the sector. A lot of government support from DJPR, but also Launch Vic. And I think it was last week or the week before, $62 million injected into the sector. In comparison to WA, which is significantly less. But you've also got a really good grassroots ecosystem that'll support a lot of Indigenous businesses. So a lot of Indigenous entrepreneurs that are moving to Victoria or moving to Melbourne in particular. Then you've got the university support and obviously RMIT, probably the leader in this space. When you look at programs like Ngami, starting Ngami off probably 2 years ago now, and I remember those initial conversations with a former staff member that flew across to Perth to really develop out a program that could support and create a network of Aboriginal entrepreneurs and business owners, how to grow and scale their business. So the thing that's really exciting for me, if there's any place I probably wouldn't move back home in New South Wales, it'd probably be Melbourne. It would be my next spot. And in particular, the rapidly growing ecosystem. What we're starting to see is just, I think, in particularly in Victoria, you've got your Victorian Aboriginal business strategy, you've got targeted programs, you've got accelerated programs as well, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, the recent Air Tree Explorer program. Barry Emmel has just shifted over in Digitech now, and I was saying before around Ngami that RMIT started. So with the RMIT Activator program, it's been fascinating to see how they will build capacity with business, Indigenous and non-Indigenous business, but then to take that next step and then develop a program specifically for Aboriginal people, or for business owners, new ventures or new venture creation, how to scale and grow, but not just the domestic market, but an international market. We've seen a lot of programs that focuses on joint ventures and the challenges, the to's and fro's about joint ventures, SMEs, but there hasn't been really anything that has targeted a space that we're obviously seeing at the moment, that it's a powerful combination that will result in exponential growth for Indigenous ventures over the coming years, shifting from a nascent sector to a rapidly growing ecosystem. So that's the really exciting thing to really understand, to impart any, I guess, knowledge I can to the steering committee for this really important program that's happening organically over in Victoria. So I think it's a really pivotal point in time. And going to Margaret's point around innovation and efficiency, they're probably the two key words that's coming out of the steering committee and this program to really grow and scale Indigenous business. They don't have to be a high growth tech business. They can be, like Bevan was saying, bush foods, even Indigenous beer that's starting to shift and starting to see an international market. So from a grassroots combination to corporate engagement, to the local mob that's really supporting it, and let alone RMIT that's really driving it and supercharging this sector. It's really exciting to be a part of.
Yeah, thanks, Les. Bevan, just looking at Indigenous business and looking at some of the disablers that stop Indigenous business growing. And obviously a lot of Indigenous businesses, they run on a very lean business model. What do you see some of the other challenges to stop them specifically from scaling up and being able to look at that overseas markets?
I think let's take a traditional owner that's running this is a real life example, a paint company in Modair in Northern Territory. He's been doing that for 20, 30 years, and he's looking at that existing market, and he's looking at the IPP market. He's painting community houses, and he's wondering, should I shift from this market to this market here and start working with the likes of Lendlease and some of the other larger companies, go after larger government contracts. And I think one of the things that are really important is that, as Les, Margaret and Peter said, you need the ecosystem in place that provides a safe foundation for someone to transfer from the IPP here in Australia, which is tremendous growth opportunities, to the international market where you start to access 1.3, 1.6 billion people for China or India, for example. And in looking at that, even for myself, I would need to look at the FTA and make sure, and we are making sure, that there's certain provisions and there's certain carve-outs that really benefit Indigenous peoples. If I was looking at bush foods, I want to make sure that when I reveal these knowledges that have been held for thousands of years, that they are protected, both through geographical indicators as much as possible. In any other way, I'd really want to make sure the infrastructure in place. I want to make sure that the likes of RMIT and Kinaway are there on the journey with me. I'd want to make sure that someone like Jarramal Legal has presence in the UK through the FTA, so that I can understand the local fabric in the UK. If I'm thinking to export, I'd look to see if there was a body like the Wheat Board in the future that would really support my business interests of Indigenous businesses. We see this whole ecosystem built through the IPP. Kinaway was established, Supply Nation was established. All the agreements throughout Australia changed, not only policy level, but also the tenders changed as well. And that made it comfortable for the person that I was talking about before, Tom Hutchison from Dundee Rock. He moved from this place of work in one community to be able to start working with large companies and start to employ a lot more people and get scale. So we needed to understand that the ecosystem was there. And through the joint venture partner, you had the resources available to be able to do that. So I think, those are one of the challenges when you look at the international market, to make sure that there is the right foundation to allow us to move from this IPP opportunity in Australia to take it to the world.
Yeah, you're right there. And I think that's what we're going to start doing. We'll start thinking a little bit differently how we approach it as well. It probably brings me another question to Les, just in regards to your experience with working with businesses and lean business models. What have you seen as the biggest challenge for a business just to scale up?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's what Bevan said. It's hard to add anything on top of that. That was a really comprehensive, impressive answer. That's wow. Yeah, I think everything's in that. I think from my experiences more around that early stage or startups, new venture creation, and I guess across the sphere of Indigenous business, that Indigenous business and ventures face unique barriers, including a lack of pre-existing business networks, low intergenerational wealth, and negative general perceptions of what an Indigenous business is and how does it operate. But we also know that talent is also widely distributed, but opportunity is not. So for us, is then when an opportunity arises, we take that with open hands, and we know it's not smooth sailing for Indigenous business, particularly from an early venture creation all the way to growing a sustainable business. But we've been innovating for the last 60,000 years. And this particular trade and exports has the power to be an equalising effect of opportunity for Aboriginal people, particularly, I think I was saying before, when 60% of our mob are under 25 now. It used to be 35 years old of age 4 years ago now. But then shifting from a transition, so transitioning from a consumer of products and services and technology to becoming a creator. So some of that shift is then really understanding those nascent markets to operate in, and what markets to attract and approach first. So there's that perception of just go to the US and grow and scale, but the US is really saturated with a lot of other businesses and technology, in particular the technology sector. But as Bevan was saying, when you've got new markets like China, and in particular here in WA, when you're pretty close to China as well, you're seeing that initiatives or ventures that are shifting from high growth technology into e-commerce businesses around protein foods. And so the research on that, so we're seeing it's a lot of external support coming into the sector that's providing capacity building for Indigenous businesses to shift internationally. Austrade, being involved with the program last year, Dream Summit, the Austrade they were sensational, they were really supportive, and that's probably one government organisation along with DJPR that do some amazing work around supporting Indigenous entrepreneurs. They've just, about 12 months ago, advertised for an Indigenous Trade Commissioner, and that's the first time that's ever happened. So we're seeing again this support from government, understanding this capacity, this nascent sector that will grow rapidly, all the way to the art sector as well. And I think that's an area where poses a lot of challenges, and particularly when 83% of Indigenous artwork is fake. And what technology is out there to try and shift the dial on that, because it's a massive, rapidly growing market here in Australia. It always has been. But then when you look internationally, it's a different market, and that poses different questions, and in particular around IP. As Bevan made a really good point I wanted to highlight as well, is that it's about, sharing stories has always been a part of our culture, but how do we share stories in a way where we're still protecting our own IP? And we're all, we've got our own stories of law, men's business and women's business, business. But those stories are really important to who we are. But sharing those stories and being an advocate of our culture and sharing that globally, there's definitely an interest there, without a doubt. But it's really understanding the nascent markets, the rapidly growing ecosystem, and how saturated those markets are, and how to access those opportunities, particularly when we've had some significant challenges that we've faced.
Yeah, thanks, Les. Margaret, being someone who's got the experience from around the world, and obviously you've drawn some synergies, with Ireland and Indigenous culture here, and obviously putting a program together like this is quite exhaustive, and a lot of research is done. I guess we'll probably move on to the next topic is, what are the gaps do you think are in some of the existing programs, and what do you think is missing in this ecosystem? You're on mute. Yeah, that's right.
Apologies, there's a bit of feedback on mine, so we muted me.
Yep.
Look, a lot. I wish I could speak to all the great comments that have been made, but I'll speak to this in terms of the gaps that I see, and these are relatively generic, and I'm sure that you can maybe add some more details. But for me, what I have found and what I'm seeing is a real polarization in the market, and kind of in education or innovation and entrepreneurship education. There's quite a lot on offer, and increasingly on offer at the startup end. And often scaling up is seen through that lens of a startup through fast scaling. And that's a very different journey to a company that's existed for 10 or 15 years and has legacy customers, legacy employees, legacy systems. Scaling up for them is different. Yes, there are common elements, but it is a different starting point. And we really need to acknowledge that. So when you work with SMEs or existing businesses, really often what you spend a lot of time helping them take another look at their existing capabilities, at their resources, as where they are in the market, at their value proposition. And particularly if you're going into another market, understanding that this business you've built around an existing value proposition, which may be very successful, may not translate into another market. And I know that even personally, I moved from Ireland to build the Australian arm of this Irish business, and they were doing a lot of lean healthcare work in Canada. And they tried to grow here and they just couldn't. And they thought, well, it's an English-speaking market, there's good healthcare, it's all the same. Absolutely not. Because the governance, And what it came down to was that nurses and frontline healthcare workers are promoted in Canada for continuous improvement, whereas in Australia, it's about compliance and governance and risk management. Okay, so these are the things that that we have to help existing businesses understand, because often innovating an existing value proposition is more difficult because of how bought in we are to it than starting from zero and doing a lot of very lean testing and getting to a value proposition through customer discovery, as startups do and are learning to do very well. So that's a gap for me. And the other gap is, if we've got a lot on startups, we also have a lot on the sort of the more MBA style programs. And, you know, this is a very personal view, but I truly believe that the MBA needs a significant overhaul. It was designed in a century and 50 years ago to help manage large global conglomerations of businesses that needed to be administered in a relatively static environment, where we could look to 5 years for data and then project that with relative security and know what we needed to do. I really think we need something, what I call the master of business design, where we need to design our businesses to deal with ambiguity, change, high growth, to redesign our value propositions and our business models over and over again. And then if we scale those newly designed businesses into markets that are more stable and are high growth, then we need some elements of the MBA. And so you've got this startup and MBA, and in the middle, there's nothing that's uniquely created for that. And this is what we're doing with this program. I believe this is what we're doing with this program. And I think that's super exciting. And I think the fact that we will do this with and for Indigenous businesses, really, and have them be the leaders and at the forefront of this new way of thinking about business, that's fantastic.
Yeah, no, thanks, Margaret. Bevan, obviously you're involved in a couple other programs and a part of the trade negotiations at the moment. What do you see as some of the gaps for Indigenous businesses to be involved in the export market?
Well, I think the first thing, and excuse me, I think the first thing is and it draws from. Sorry, guys, I'm just. I think one of the first things is for us to, you know, and it's just, you're not going to do anything if you don't believe it's for you. You're just not going to do it. We need to, you know, I work with a lot of traditional owners in remote areas. They don't even know about the IPP, by the way, a lot of them. So I think, or do they think that this is part of culture and tradition? So I think the first thing for us to really embrace and understand that trade and not only in Australia but with other nations is part of our culture. We need to really embrace that as a people. We saw the Macussan traders trade to Indonesia as a people. One of the first things, and it goes back to our mindset, we need to really embrace the fact that this is a new season, that this nation and much of its wealth is held in the hands of the Indigenous nations. If you look from a native title perspective, when you also understand that there's so much traditions and knowledges that haven't been touched, I think we as a people need to really embrace the fact that we are the entrepreneurs of the ancient world, and really embrace and come forward as a community and understand that we have something to teach the rest of the world about how to do business and the importance of caring for country and the importance that businesses must support communities. That's something that we need to really embrace as a people and know that that's a mandate upon Indigenous nations, not just in Australia and throughout the world, to speak that word to the rest of the nations and to come forth and take that place at the table like Ignite has done and like RMIT, Kinaway have done, and say, we have something to say and it's a good story, it's a good message for the rest of the world. And as Margaret says, times are changing, and we need to make room for that message for the Indigenous nations to come forward. And I speak this because I work with Taiwanese Indigenous nations, Malaysian Indigenous, all over the world, and they're all coming forward, and they're saying, we have something to say. I think when we really embrace that and come forward, and I speak to the Indigenous businesses and come forward and link with the likes of Margaret and the understanding through the Irish people about minority and the need to have a voice, and that we have something to add is a really powerful thing. If you understand those things, and I know I'm speaking high level, but I think if you understand those things, then those other opportunities will open up for you. And if you don't understand those things, then the growth will be not as rapid as what it should be, given, as I said, that most of the nation is held under title by Indigenous peoples. There's so much culture and tradition that's been covered for 250 years, and this is the opportunity to step forward and say, I want to share this with the rest of the world. We need to change our mindset. And I think that's the first barrier that Indigenous peoples and Indigenous businesses need to overcome, that we do have a place not only in the national market, but in the global market. And in fact, we've been trading with other nations long before many other countries as well.
Yeah,
probably not the answer that you expected, Scott, but that's just in my that those things are embraced by all Indigenous nations.
Yeah, and look, with some of the work we've been doing, and Peter's been involved in some of this work as well, we've been doing some work with Global Victoria, and I think one of the other big things out there is the elephant in the room is our businesses not having visibility to what support's out there. You don't know what you don't know. So I guess that one of the ideas of running this program is we're going to enable a lot of people to understand what it looks like and what supports are there. And I'll just, Peter, just quickly, before I go to Les to ask him about the gaps. Look, just with Indigenous businesses, and obviously we're looking at the growth of Indigenous business right now. Why is the Trade Routes program required, and what do you think it's different to other programs like Global Victoria?
Well, I think it's required because I think for us it was we obviously saw that. I mean, it's a partnership with RMIT, so this is not about us. This is about RMIT and people like Bevan and Les actually coming up with a really great program that the government could see the benefit in supporting. But I think that it's needed because obviously it's going to provide support, guidance, capability building, capacity building for Aboriginal businesses, Victorian Aboriginal businesses, to see a wider opportunity, I think, for participation in global markets in a way, as you said, you don't know what you don't know. I mean, haven't been able to see that opportunity previously. I think this is ahead of the game with, my Global Vic colleagues. I mean, they're kind of coming on board now, but this opportunity, was seized by Aboriginal economic development, coming out of our business strategy and building on our interest in partnering with organisations like RMIT, because the expertise in this is not with us. It's with RMIT, it's with people like Les and Bevan, and this is an opportunity for government to support those who know this space and can provide guidance and advice and support to businesses. That's not our role. There are people out there, all the people on this panel, who have that insight. Our role is to provide the support, the funding, and some of the sort of policy settings to allow this kind of activity to happen. So I just think it's fantastic. It's going to be absolutely fantastic for our businesses, and very exciting for people like Les and Bevan, who are clearly just way out in front on what's needed here. You know, I think I certainly worked on Launch Vic back in the really early days, working with a nascent startup ecosystem. And I think we can definitely see here, as Les has said, a nascent, rapidly developing Aboriginal business ecosystem. So I think for all those reasons, that's why we're here supporting this.
Sure. No, thanks, Pia. Yeah, Les, I guess obviously your experience, and you know, obviously have some visibility of what's happening in WA, what's happening in Victoria, and obviously through around the country. What do you see as some of the gaps with existing programs, and guess what's missing from the ecosystem in your view?
Yeah, great. It's again echoing what Pia said. It's a really good point, particularly around if we can create almost this Launch Vic style of what Victoria's done extremely well, and it's Australia's leader when it comes to. I was talking about yesterday in a meeting. You've got Victoria and probably a distant second, Sydney, and followed by Brisbane, and then here in WA. But what we could be creating is this rapidly growing ecosystem, a market that's in its really formative years, that's really getting, has its challenges, but has the potential to grow into something really quite significant, like Launch Vic has done with that startup ecosystem, and bringing back some of those startup unicorns from the US back into Victoria, which helps with jobs. And some of those, I think, the gaps. As Margaret said, she made a really good point around startups, and then in traditional business around small business SMEs or joint ventures. And there's this perception that, you know, going from what Margaret talked about before with startups, there's, you know, 4 key areas around those gaps for, say, an Indigenous startup. That's scalability, traction and differentiation, and market relevance. So it's really looking at how to develop some of those gaps, developing a product or service that will provide a service to 100 people or 1 million customers, but having some proof of concept, some traction in the market, and some existing support, so existing sales around there to move or shift into a market as well. But the differentiation component is then the ability to disrupt the marketplace, but articulating a value proposition, a strong Indigenous value proposition, which is the core of who we are, but also our businesses that we create, but also the ability to articulate the difference in a massive market, because it is really quite, I think one of those gaps is overwhelmed, because it's where do you start? You know, globally it's massive. What market do you start in? Where do you get your research from? Who will support this? Because there's a lot of support structures out there, but that might not have your best interest at heart. But when you've got programs like RMIT, support from DJPR, that provide an opportunity for an Indigenous, it's almost like a one-stop shop for Indigenous businesses and ventures to come in, go through a program which will help them to grow and scale in a rapidly growing market globally as well, where we're seeing those barriers that are being reduced every day with the growth of technology, from e-commerce business to traditional business. But as Margaret was saying, with the MBA, it was funny, 6 months ago I was looking at the MBA, and it was RMIT that came on top. It's probably a shameless plug for RMIT, but where there was previously a focus on statistics and traditional business, seeing a shift from global business and also social impact. And that's something that I think maybe I haven't covered on the call, on this call, is around social impact. Because most Indigenous ventures have that social impact focus. And we're seeing globally a shift towards social impact businesses from ESG shareholders. We've seen what happened with Rio and the ousting of their CEO as a result. So a significant shift around social impact, and seeing that starting to shift globally. We've seen in the US, Hong Kong, and other places as well. And there's an opportunity where we naturally, our businesses have a social impact focus, so compared to non-Indigenous businesses. But the challenge for, say, an early stage startup in particular, you're not generating revenue for years, and you're trying to find a gap in the market that's repeatable and scalable. But the difference for a small business or an SME, Indigenous SME, is that, like Margaret was saying, you've got legacy systems, infrastructure, staffing, and what market to go down or to follow. So you have support structures like landing pads or Austrade that can help get you there, but they're a 90-day program. Whereas this with RMIT will actually really, and I keep using the word supercharge, will supercharge Indigenous business, what markets to enter in, how to become a scalable international business. I think some of those challenges of just people who've previously done it, and Indigenous businesses have done it themselves, which is amazing. but the ecosystem is currently really disjointed and fragmented. There's a lot of amazing work. So you're seeing cooperative models being developed here in WA, like the Noongar Land Enterprise Group, a group of Noongar farmers coming together, seeking capital, and then exporting honey, cattle, and beef, or beef, same thing, but pork over into international markets as well. So you're seeing the emergence of community-based mechanisms to promote Indigenous business and the development of Indigenous business as well. So it's shifting from the disjointed, fragmented ecosystem to a collective or cooperative ecosystem that this program will really push forward.
Yeah, look, you make a good point there, Les, and that's something very similar we're seeing in Victoria as well. A lot of collaboration now between Indigenous businesses, which then obviously help them scale up a much faster way. And some of the research we've done with our businesses is the access to capital has been quite difficult for numerous reasons. One, not having equity has been an issue. I know, in my family, I was the first one to finish year 12 and first one to buy a house. So that, can you imagine what it is like for some other people who didn't have the education that I had? And then at the same time, trust is a big issue with the financial institutions. That we don't want to get things on tick, that we do want to pay for things ourselves, and sometimes it's probably one of our biggest disablers. So getting trust in that system is quite difficult, and that's something we're finding with a lot of our members at the moment. Look, we are getting close to the end, so we might just go into now a good opportunity just to talk about the program itself. So I might hand over to Margaret. We might just talk about a couple of the pillars and the process from here, and then after that we'll get into some Q&A. So, Margaret.
Good. Thank you. Thanks, Scott. Thanks, everybody, for all the great insights. And every time I listen to these people that I'm surrounded by, I add something else to the program. So I think we may need to extend this for a very long time, Pia. There we go. Look, maybe if we can just bring up the visual of the journey, I'll maybe speak to that, and it might help the audience track along with us. So Scott introduced it earlier by saying it's got there are three major components to the program. The first, or stage one, being around co-design. We all felt very strongly that this is a collaborative and collective effort. Really, the whole concept, I think, of self-determination speaks to every entrepreneur and every business owner. Fundamentally, many of us are driven by making a change, but also owning our own futures. And that's a critical mindset piece. And I use that word a lot. And I think, Bevan, the really passionate and authentic way you spoke about finding that mindset to own your place on the global stage as an Indigenous business, and to put forward that knowledge and experience is really vital. And so this is what we are trying to capture in that co-design stage. We're working very closely with our steering committee. And the steering committee are equally going out to their own communities and to the business community and feeding these insights back to us. And we are actively capturing these in the design of the program. And so this program then, after that, works really on the basis of building a common foundation, because yes, this is a nascent ecosystem, and we actually want to be able to make sure that we design in the fact that the participants in this program will learn from each other. They will shape their own outcomes. They will shape every next step. But in order to do that, and in order for us to track how this is progressing and whether we're on track or off track, we do need to have a common language and a shared set of frameworks as a group of businesses. And that's what the first 3 months, or this stage 2 enabling, is about. It's really about how do we share the knowledge and frameworks and capabilities to allow us to be more entrepreneurial and innovative in how we grow our businesses and how we scale our businesses. Okay. And we do that drawing from innovation methodologies, from lean methodologies, from startup methodologies, but in a very hands-on way. So it's designed by and for practitioners. I myself have been an entrepreneur. I've worked with businesses large and small in Europe and here in Australia and in the US. And so it's about the doing. It's about asking the right questions, having some frameworks to make decisions, to de-risk those decisions and getting to outcomes really, really fast. So this is not about sitting in a classroom and PowerPoint lectures. It's about some really key frameworks and canvases and methodologies, learning about those in a one-day deep dive session, and then with coaching, applying those over and over again so that you're moving forward all the time. We're looking at kicking off with about a day and a half of an immersive session, creating those connections across the cohort with all the coaches, with all the mentors, and starting out on that first piece is about how do we take a new, fresh look at our business? What do we have? What do we not have? What is our value proposition? How do we think as a founder or a business owner? Have we got that mindset that Bevan relates to? Do we feel confident and competent to take our place on a world stage? And if not, how do we get there? Are we ready? Is our business ready? What does growth mean for me and for my community? So a lot of it is asking those questions so that we set off together on that journey. And then we start to really actively look at redesigning our capabilities, looking at, I call it zooming in and zooming out, zooming into ourselves and our business, and then zooming out to the world and seeing where we can find our fit. And that's what that next piece is about. So generating a set of opportunities and then going through some really rigorous approaches to understanding what are the right ones for us? What are the right markets? How do I need to adapt my value proposition? What capabilities do I have? What capabilities or technologies do I not have that would make this better or easier? How do I find them? How do I connect into those? And then finally, at the end of that 3 months, looking at the focus. So really, of this set of opportunities, I've done my due diligence. I'm going to focus on this one. I'm going to park these because I may need them, but this is the one that I'm going to go after. And really, we exit that first 3 months with a very, very personalized trade route or global growth program for you and your business. The next 6 months are about us as a collective, including the department, including our amazing steering committee, including RMIT and the cohort itself, really taking that opportunity and making it happen over 6 months. Whether that's us helping you access a new channel to that export market, whether it's about going and setting something up in that export market and leveraging an Austrade Launchpad, whether it's about speaking to Les about how do I raise fund? What is the best way for me as an Indigenous business to raise funding around this? Whether it's talking to Bevan about how do I protect my cultural IP as I do this? But really having a very customized and personalized plan and then making it happen. And that's what we're all here to do. It's not a theoretical exercise. It's an exercise in action. And we're really excited about that. We don't want to be overly prescriptive about it. We think this is particularly the first 3 months is a good way to set people up. And then the next 6 months will be a work in action. So I'm going to stop there. I hope I've given you a sense of what it is, and please, everybody else, jump in and really explain what I've missed, and happy to answer any questions now. But also, if there are more questions, we're happy to convene a half an hour online where we can go into that specifically in more detail.
Sure. Has anyone got anything else like to add to that moment before I get the question started? You're on mute, Pia.
I am. Okay, I'm not. Look, I just wanted to say, listening to Margaret there. I think the two things that, coming back to what you were asking about, why this program, I think 2 points that Margaret made really stand out. I think one is the focus on export. It's a really focused program with a really good sort of program design. And, I think that is a real strength and one of the things that I think is the reason we support it, because I just think it provides a clear direction for a group of businesses that for which there's a lot of potential in export. So, I just wanted to make that kind of point out of Margaret, what Margaret's just said.
And I just might add, if I can, Scott, that, the real opportunity through this will come through Indigenous inclusions in free trade agreements. We saw, it's no different in the IPP space when those tenders included those Indigenous inclusions that required subbies to primes to engage Indigenous business and subbies to engage Indigenous businesses. So that's why it's really important to be right at the headwater and make sure that those FTAs have strong Indigenous inclusions in them. Because of the simple talk, and I'll just say around the FTAs, especially the UK, with Jeremy Legal, our partner's global and in 64 countries. So we thought it was a wise approach just to leverage through technology, as Les said, their presence in the UK. We don't need to set up incorporate another entity, but use that office as we do around Australia and their presence to really enter that global stage. I just wanted to say those things. That was simply from discussion around an FTA with the UK, the accelerator program, and looking at what can we do that's manageable in the circumstances and wise, and we'll look to establish that business in the UK. I just wanted to mention that to viewers, just if they were thinking about how to go about it. There's one simple way that we've done it through technology, or looking to do it. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Bevan. Les, did you have anything you wanted to add, mate?
Really, really fast. Just the highly interactive nature of this program. It's not just come to a class and sit and you'll be spoken to or taught at. It's highly interactive. So it's getting mob involved. It's creating space for mob to explore these ideas, challenge conversations. But the highly interactive nature of this is probably the most exciting part that I wanted to highlight. Really super briefly, mindful of time.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Les. All right, I think James was coming back in to facilitate some questions. So until here he is, the main man, James Brown.
Thanks everyone for this morning. Some really great conversation there. We do have a handful of questions. We've had plenty of comments come through. Everyone's saying they really enjoyed this morning's panel discussion. So we might take the next couple of minutes just fielding a couple of these questions that have come through. With the first one, which should pop up any second now. And it says, thanks for this morning, everyone. How do we access these services? I'm not sure
I might just say, really, there's, I think in the chat you'll see it, but the website www.rmit.edu.au, and then for business to Activator programs and trade routes. But the link is in the comments section there, and I'm sure that we can make that available through the Kinaway website as well. We can send email. Yeah.
Thanks, Margaret. Yeah, if you just jump onto the Kinaway Facebook and YouTube chat channels. You'll see a link to the website, then also a link to the applications as well. The next one we have is from Mandy. She asked, do I need to be an existing business, or can I access this program as I want to get into business?
At the moment, it has been designed for existing businesses, so businesses that are set up and do have some trading activity. I am sure that the panel and their can speak to you in terms of Indigenous startup or pre-accelerators, and of course RMIT Activator also runs a pre-accelerator program. So but it is at the moment designed for existing businesses with an ABN and doing some trading.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Mandy. And like I said before, we've had plenty of comments come through with only a handful of questions. So this will be the final one for this morning, and it's from Steve. And he says, I know we're talking a lot about growth, especially internationally. Through this program, do we have the opportunity to evaluate our existing business and domestic presence and aspirations also? I think you might have touched on that briefly in your presentation, Margaret.
Yeah. You know, a trade program for you, for example, might be expanding nationally with a view to then having a footprint that you can take internationally. So absolutely looking at evaluating your existing business. And I think one of these things is that, you know, we would, and particularly my experience has been, and it's like IP, you need to think about these things from the start. So, you know, to start your business and to start today, preferably with a global growth perspective. Okay, so domestic growth doesn't exclude global growth, and global growth doesn't exclude domestic growth. And so I think from the perspective of you have a business and it needs to seek out and find a presence on the global stage, because you will have something that is of value. That is really, really important.
Absolutely. Thanks, Margaret. And I believe that is all the questions that we have for this morning. So I'd just like to thank Pia, Margaret, Les, Bevan and Scott for joining us this morning. Some really robust and all-encompassing sort of conversations. So on behalf of Kinaway and our members and anyone who may have tuned in, we'd just like to thank you all for your participation in this morning's panel discussion.
Thanks. Pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For everyone else, thanks for tuning in. We all hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to check out any sort of support services that Kinaway have here on offer. Please leave a like on today's video, subscribe and turn on the notifications, and we will see you all soon for Kinaway's upcoming webinars.